We were camping at Keystone State Park in Pennsylvania. It was early August, hot and sticky during the day, but cool enough at night that sleeping in the tent didn't feel like a punishment. I had taken my 11-year-old niece, Lily, on this trip. Her parents, my sister and brother-in-law, needed a weekend to themselves, and I figured it'd be a good time to bond. She loved the idea of a tent and sleeping under the stars, and I thought the park would be perfect. It was popular but not overwhelming, enough people around to feel safe, enough space to feel like we had a little corner to ourselves. Our site was up a gentle hill, about 200 feet from the edge of the lake. It wasn't right on the water, but close enough that we could walk down barefoot in 10 minutes. It had a fire ring, a picnic table, and enough flat ground for our 4-person tent. Across from us was another site, one of those larger ones with 2 tents and an old station wagon parked in the gravel drive. I remember seeing an older man when we arrived the first day. He was setting up a tarp over one of the tents. Tall, maybe in his 70s, wearing jeans despite the heat. He waved when he saw me and gave a small nod. I nodded back, didn't think much of it. The first night went smoothly. We grilled hot dogs and made s'mores. Lily kept laughing at the way the marshmallows caught fire no matter how patient she tried to be. We stayed up late, lying on the sleeping bags, whispering about the stars. She fell asleep before I did, and I listened to the soft hum of other campers, distant laughter, the occasional sound of a beer can opening, the murmur of radios. Normal campground noise. I heard some coughing from the site across the road. The older man probably winding down for the night. That was the last time I heard anything from over there. The next morning we had breakfast, instant oatmeal and some fruit. Lily wanted to swim right after. I told her to wait until late morning, let it warm up a little more. We ended up heading down to the lake around 11. We brought towels, a little cooler with juice and sandwiches, and spent most of the afternoon swimming. I didn't have my phone with me. There's something about leaving it behind that makes camping feel more like a break from everything. We just played in the water, had lunch, and when it started to cloud up a bit around 3, I told her it was time to head back. She wanted to stay longer, but I convinced her we could come back before dinner. We started walking up the gravel path that leads from the lake to the upper campgrounds. It was steeper than I remembered, or maybe it just felt that way carrying the wet towels and cooler. As we got closer to our site, I noticed the cluster of vehicles. A park ranger truck was pulled up right in front of the campsite across from us, angled in like it had come in fast. There were 2 police cars parked awkwardly behind it, one partially on the grass. I slowed down as we got closer. Lily asked what was going on, but I told her to just hold my hand and stay close. A ranger, mid-40s maybe, stepped out from behind one of the cruisers and came toward us. His face was calm but serious. He looked tired. He told us to hold up and said that there had been an incident at the campsite across from ours. At first, I thought maybe there had been a fight or a medical issue. Maybe someone had a heart attack. The ranger looked at Lily, then back at me, and asked if we could just wait a bit. He didn't want her to be too close. I got the message and nodded, but Lily was already trying to look past him, squinting toward the tents and the open area where the picnic table was. She kept asking what happened. A few more people were standing by the tents now. One of them wore gloves and carried a clipboard. No one was in a rush. That's what I noticed most. The stillness. Nobody was yelling or moving quickly. That quiet, steady movement made it worse somehow. The ranger stepped a bit closer to me and, in a low voice, said that the man in the site across from ours had passed away. In his sleep sometime the night before. They found him still in his sleeping bag inside the tent. Said someone noticed his car was still there and he hadn't checked out by the posted time. That's what prompted the call. It hit me slower than I expected. I just stood there, not knowing what to say. I didn't know the man. I hadn't spoken a single word to him, but he had been right there, just 30 feet from us. We had been roasting marshmallows, telling stories, and he had been dying in the dark. Lily didn't fully understand what had happened. She kept asking me if someone got hurt, if there had been a bear or something. When I told her softly that the man had died, she went quiet for a second, then looked across the road again. There were bundles of firewood stacked neatly next to the site's picnic table. right beside a blue plastic water jug and a pair of boots. Then she said it. "Can we keep his firewood? He doesn't need it now." I just stared at her. I didn't even know how to respond. She wasn't being mean, just practical in that matter-of-fact way kids are sometimes. I told her no, that it wasn't ours to take. She shrugged like it didn't matter, but I felt something inside me sink. It wasn't just the comment. It was the weight of the whole moment. The contrast between life and death, right there in the dirt and gravel of a public campground. Eventually, the ranger let us go back to our site. I tried to keep Lily distracted, set her up with some drawing supplies at the picnic table while I busied myself with lighting the fire for dinner. But every time I looked up, I could see the corner of the blue tent, just across the road, the zipped flap closed now, and someone standing nearby with a camera taking pictures. By dusk, the vehicles were gone. They had taken the tent down. Everything else was packed into the station wagon, which they towed away behind a ranger vehicle. The site looked almost normal again, just an empty square of dirt with flattened grass where the tent had been. The firewood was still there. That night, we didn't talk much. Lily seemed quieter than usual. I think the weight of it finally settled into her too. Kids aren't dumb. They know when something's off. I lay in my sleeping bag and stared up at the tent ceiling, wondering what it had been like for him. Had he felt it coming? Was it peaceful? Was he alone by choice? Or did he have someone waiting for him to come home? It stayed with me longer than I expected. We stayed 2 more nights, but it felt different after that. Every rustle in the dark felt closer. Every silence felt heavier. I kept thinking about the way no one knew until it was already over. How life just kept going around him, the world spinning forward while he slipped away unnoticed. I told Lily a little more when we got home, about how people sometimes go quickly without warning. I didn't make it dramatic. I just told her the truth. She nodded like she understood. Maybe she did in her own way. I didn't take the firewood. Someone else probably did later that week. Maybe they burned it not knowing, or maybe they heard the story and decided it shouldn't go to waste. Either way, it didn't feel right for us. Not because it was haunted or anything like that, just because it wasn't ours. It belonged to someone whose last night was spent beside it. I've been camping plenty of times since. I've stayed at state parks, deep woods, remote trails, and familiar sites, but I always notice the people around me a little more now. I take a moment to nod, say hello, just check in. It doesn't take much. And every now and then, I think about the man across the road, how quietly he passed, and how a little girl reminded me, without meaning to, just how thin the line can be between a story you tell and the one you don't even know you're in. I was camping in Seo National Park in southern Kenya. It was a trip I had been looking forward to for months, the kind of wild, raw experience you read about but never really expect to live through. The day had been long and hot, with the sun baking the dusty earth as we drove deep into the park. The landscape stretched out wide and empty, full of tall yellow grass, scattered acacia trees, and distant hills that shimmered in the heat. My guide and tracker, a man named Kamau, knew every inch of the place like it was his own backyard. I trusted him completely. He was calm and confident, and his knowledge of the animals was incredible. We set up camp in a small clearing not far from a dry riverbed. The air was thick with the smell of dust, dry grass, and something ancient and wild that you only notice when you're truly alone in the wilderness. Kamau set up our tents carefully, making sure everything was secure. He built a fire pit, gathered wood, and kept reminding me to stay close to the fire once night fell. The sun went down in a wash of red and orange, and soon darkness swallowed the park. I was exhausted from the heat and the travel, so I fell asleep quickly inside my tent. The fabric was thin, and I could hear the faint sounds of the bush around me. The chirping of crickets, the rustling of small animals in the grass, the occasional distant call of a bird. But then, deep into the night, I woke up to a sound that hit something deep inside my brain, something primal and terrifying. A lion was roaring, not just a soft growl or a warning, but a full, guttural, bone-shaking roar, close enough to make my heart slam against my ribs. I froze in my sleeping bag for a moment, my breath caught in my throat. It wasn't just one lion. The roar was answered by another, and then another. Somewhere off in the distance, elephants trumpeted in reply. It was like the entire park had suddenly come alive with a wild and dangerous symphony. Nothing I have ever experienced before or since has touched that part of my brain that feels pure, raw fear. The lions were near, and I was right in their home. I forced myself to move. I carefully unzipped the tent and stepped out into the cool night air. The fire was just a few feet away, and I could see Kamau already awake, crouched by the flames, adding more wood and coaxing the fire to burn higher. The flames threw long shadows across the clearing, and the crackling sound was somehow comforting. Kamau told me later that the fire was the one thing that keeps the lions and other predators from coming too close. Without it, I would have been in real danger. As I sat by the fire, my eyes fixed on the edge of the camp, where the darkness seemed to hold more secrets than I wanted to imagine. A few hundred yards away, at the edge of the camp, was a man camping alone. I didn't know him, hadn't met him since we arrived. But there he was, a small figure barely visible in the moonlight. Suddenly, his tent started moving. I watched as the fabric rustled and shifted, and then I heard the zipper slide open. The man jumped out, running flat out towards his Land Rover parked just a few steps away, no more than 50 feet from his tent. He jumped in, slammed the door, and started the engine. The whole thing looked so sudden, so frantic. At the time, it felt almost funny in the strange way that only a fight or flight moment can be. But it was clear he wasn't sticking around to test the night. In the morning, when the sun finally began to warm the earth again, Kamau and I walked around the campsite. We found tracks, dozens of them, lions. Over 35 lions, maybe more, a pride that had been circling us during the night, watching, waiting. The sheer number of them, their proximity to our camp, made me realize how close I had come to something dangerous, how fragile the line was between safety and being prey in the wild. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched for the rest of the day. Every rustle in the grass, every distant sound made me glance over my shoulder. I learned that in places like Seo, you're never really alone. The wilderness is full of eyes, ears, and teeth. You just have to hope the fire stays lit. After that trip, I thought nothing would come close to that kind of primal fear. But a few months later, I found myself camping on a remote beach in Northern California, and the kind of fear I experienced there was different but no less real. This place was wild in a different way, still cold and remote. I had hiked several miles over the headlands to reach it, camping near cliffs that looked out over the endless Pacific Ocean. The water crashed against the rocks far below, white foam glinting in the weak sunlight. The sky was often gray or misty, and the wind whipped cold and salty against my skin. I was alone, completely alone. No cell service, no other campers, no signs of life except seabirds and the sound of the waves. The isolation was total, and that gave the place a quiet that felt unnatural. I have been to many remote places before, and grew up on the coast north of San Francisco, but this beach was something else. It was beautiful but eerie, the kind of place that makes you watch your back even when you're the only person around. On the day I arrived, I passed a couple hiking the trail in. They looked normal, no trouble at all. We exchanged quiet nods, nothing more. They went off in the opposite direction, and I thought nothing more of it. I set up my tent on a small flat area near the cliffs, careful to pitch it far enough from the edge. The night came quickly, and the wind picked up. I made a small fire on the beach and settled in with a book, the ocean's roar filling the silence around me. For 3 days, I explored the area, climbing the cliffs, wandering the tide pools, and listening to the wind. I never saw another person except for one car parked miles away at the only pullout on the narrow coastal road. The remoteness felt like both a gift and a threat. It was pure solitude, but also pure vulnerability. Then the news came. I was still at the camp when I heard it on the radio. 2 people had been found decapitated in their tent, just a few miles down the coast, in a place almost exactly like mine. The police said it was a brutal, violent crime, and they hadn't found any suspects. The details were sparse, but the image stuck in my mind like a dark stain. The location matched where I had camped and where I had seen that couple hiking in. I didn't know if the couple I had passed was the same couple or if it was some other people. I never saw anyone else. The fact that no one was caught, no explanation given, left the story open-ended in my mind. I packed up my things quickly after that, but the feeling of being watched and the silence of the place made me check over my shoulder more than once. The ocean never stopped roaring, and the wind never stopped howling, but the beach was no longer peaceful for me. It was a reminder that even the most beautiful places can hide darkness. The kind of darkness that doesn't come from nature, but from something much more human and just as terrifying. I left the coast with a heavy feeling in my chest, knowing that some places carry stories you don't want to be part of, but sometimes they find you anyway. Both those experiences, so far apart in the world, stayed with me. One was the raw power of wild animals, the other the cold reality of human violence. Neither involved ghosts or shadows, just the harsh truths of life in the wild and in isolation. They taught me that fear isn't always about monsters or myths. Sometimes it's about being truly exposed, knowing that survival depends on a single spark of fire or a quick dash to a truck. And sometimes it's about realizing that the scariest things aren't roaring lions or crashing waves, but the silence that follows a terrible crime and the questions it leaves unanswered. The night we spent in the White Mountains still sticks with me, even weeks later. I keep turning it over in my mind, trying to make sense of what happened. There were two strange things that night, things I'm not sure are connected, but both left me feeling uneasy. I've told a few people, but most just brush it off or try to give some easy explanation. I want to share exactly what I saw and felt. No fancy stories or made-up stuff, just what happened. We were camping at a fairly quiet spot in the White Mountains of New Hampshire, late September. It was a new moon, so the night was almost completely dark. No moonlight at all, just the faint, distant glow of the stars if you looked up. My girlfriend, our friend, and I had picked this spot because it was remote, surrounded by thick woods, and we wanted to get away from the city noise for a few days. The campground was mostly empty, only a few sites were taken. We set up our tent in a flat clearing with pine trees all around. The air smelled like damp earth and fallen leaves. It was the kind of place that feels peaceful by day but changes after dark. I remember it was chilly that evening. We had a campfire going for warmth and to cook some food. The fire crackled and popped, sending sparks up into the black sky. We talked quietly, told stories, and watched the flames. Eventually, we all got tired and went to bed around 11. The forest sounds slowly filled the air. The rustling of leaves, the distant call of an owl, the snap of a twig. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary, but a couple hours after I'd fallen asleep, I woke up needing to pee. It was completely dark inside our tent. I unzipped the flap slowly and stepped outside, careful not to trip on anything. The cold air hit my face immediately. I grabbed my flashlight from the tent's pocket and clicked it on, but kept it aimed low so I wouldn't disturb the others. The ground was soft with fallen pine needles, and I could see the faint outline of trees all around. I made my way toward the campground's trash area, which was just a short walk down the path from our site. The path was narrow, barely more than a dirt trail, surrounded by dense woods on either side. When I dropped off the trash and started heading back, something caught my eye toward the back of an empty campsite nearby. I wasn't sure what it was at first. The shape was pale, almost white or light gray, and it stood out against the dark background of trees and shadows. At first, I thought maybe it was a person collecting kindling or something. I imagined someone crouched or standing still, trying not to make noise, but the shape didn't move, not even a little. I watched for a moment, waiting to see if it would shift or turn. Nothing. It just stayed there, like some kind of statue or a big piece of pale cloth hanging in the dark. I thought maybe it was a birch tree, but that spot was strange for one. Birch trees usually grow in groups or open areas, not right in the middle of a campsite, especially one that was empty. It didn't look like bark either, more like smooth, pale skin or fabric. I felt my stomach tighten with a strange feeling, a mix of curiosity and something like fear. I told myself I'd check it out in the morning when I could see clearly. I didn't want to get too close in the dark. I finished the walk back to our tent, tried to shake off the feeling, and crawled back into my sleeping bag. But the image of that pale shape stuck in my mind. I lay awake for a while, listening to the forest sounds, trying to convince myself it was nothing. Later that night, maybe an hour after I got back to the tent, my girlfriend woke up and went outside too. When she came back, she looked shaken. She said she saw something strange. Glowing coals scattered around the tent area and further into the woods. At first, I thought she was imagining things, but then I got up to pee again and saw them myself. The glowing coals were faint, but definitely there, like someone had taken the ashes and hot embers from a fire and scattered them around in little piles or patches. They glowed with a dull orange light, just bright enough to be noticed in the pitch black. The weirdest part was how spread out they were, around the tent, near trees, and deeper into the forest. It didn't make sense. We hadn't moved any coals or ashes after putting out our fire hours earlier. There were no campfires anywhere near those spots that night, and no one else was camping close enough to do it. I took a closer look at a few patches. The coals looked cold, like they'd stopped glowing hours ago but somehow kept a faint ember light. There was no smell of smoke or burning wood, which you'd expect if they were fresh. Just that strange glowing, like dying embers refusing to go out. The ground around the coals was dark and damp. My friend was awake by then and came outside to see. He saw the coals too and got uneasy. We all stood there in silence, shining our flashlights around the tent and woods, trying to figure out what was going on. It felt like something was watching us, just beyond the reach of the light. We didn't say much after that. I went back to the tent and tried to sleep, but my mind was racing. The pale shape, the glowing coals, they felt connected somehow. Maybe it was a sign or a warning, or maybe just the weird tricks of the forest at night. I don't know. Morning came slow. When the sun finally rose, it turned the woods from dark and shadowy to bright and clear. I made my way over to that empty campsite where I'd seen the pale shape. In the daylight, I looked all around carefully. There was no birch tree or anything pale in that spot. Instead, I saw only the normal dark brown bark of pine and maple trees. The ground was covered in leaves and pine needles, undisturbed. I asked my girlfriend and friend to come check. None of us could find any sign of what I'd seen the night before. No pale figure, no weird white shape, no kindling collector. Just the empty campsite, quiet and still. We packed up that day and left the mountains, but the memory of that night stayed with me. Back home, we started talking about what we saw and what it could mean. We looked up local stories about strange sightings in that area, Coos County, New Hampshire. That's when we came across something called the Wood Devil. The Wood Devil isn't a ghost or monster like you see in movies. It's described as a tall, pale figure that moves silently through the woods. People who claim to have seen it say it stands out because of its pale skin, almost glowing white against the dark trees. Some say it watches from the shadows, always just out of reach or sight. It's a local legend, a mysterious presence that some say is real and others dismiss as folklore. Thinking about the Wood Devil gave me chills. It matched what I saw. The pale figure that didn't move, the strange glowing coals like embers scattered in the forest. Maybe it's a creature or just a trick of the light, but I don't think I imagined it. I felt the fear and confusion when I saw those things, and I still feel it now when I remember. That night in the White Mountains wasn't just a camping trip. It was something else, something real and strange that I can't explain. Maybe it's best left as a mystery, but I know one thing. The woods around us hold more secrets than we want to believe, and some things don't want to be found or understood. I've been camping in desert canyons since I was a kid. My earliest memories are of sleeping under a sky so vast it felt like a whole new kind of darkness. The wind moving through the rocks, carrying the echo of history. My family, grandparents, parents, uncles, aunts, cousins, siblings, took over the old ranch out there. It was remote, miles from paved roads, miles from help. We off-road through dry washes and steep rocky paths, cooking over open fires, sleeping under canvas, and yes, practicing our shooting at designated target zones tucked deep into those canyons. The place was wholly ours, enclosed by quiet sandstone walls that rose above us like silent guardians. We treated it like a refuge, a place to teach the kids to respect guns, to defend if necessary, and to carry themselves with purpose. One weekend, around late spring when the weather starts to chill at night, we all packed up. 15 adults, maybe 8 kids, and enough guns to arm half a small army. We hauled in 2 6-foot tables, each stacked with rifles, handguns, ammo boxes. My dad always emphasized safety, so the guns were laid out within reach, but everyone knew the rules. Muzzle down, finger off the trigger, shoot only at the steel plates 300 yards away. The sun crept higher. Spent casings glittered on the tables like tiny soldiers. Twice I wiped my brow before sliding forward to shoulder my uncle's AR. Felt the weight of it, smelled the gun oil, heard the satisfying ping when my bullet hit the target. Kids watched. Some gripped pistols too heavy for them, but with adults guiding, they squeezed off rounds that clanged on the target backstop. The rhythm was calm, orderly, even joyful in a strange sort of way. It was family time, wilderness time, time that felt like ours. It was mid-afternoon. I just cleaned up after feeding my younger cousin water and snacks when I heard gravel crunching over the ridge. I glanced up and my heart thumped. 2 trucks rolled in slowly, bumping over loose stones, stopping maybe 20 yards from our camp, parked side by side in a way that sealed us off. They sat low, dark windows. Dust coated their fenders. As 4 guys climbed out, 2 from each truck, they moved purposeful, slow. Guns hung from their shoulders, straps loose. They weren't sneaking. They were letting us see them. Silence hit. A high-pitched break across the desert stillness. Conversation stopped mid-laugh. The tables of guns now looked like fortifications, like arms ready at a barricade. I remember goosebumps sliding up my neck. Instantly, 4 of the adults, my dad, brother, 2 uncles, stood and grabbed the nearest rifle. A few more grabbed handguns. The rest of us, adults and older kids, stepping forward to flank behind tables or parked trucks like shields. The younger kids were guided back, tucked behind legs and beds of trucks. Even my mom, who normally used canes to walk, set them aside, gripped a rifle, found a solid stance and shouldered it. I grabbed my uncle's AR, snug against my shoulder, finger off the trigger, eyes locked. The stranger that looked like the leader stepped forward, head high, chest out. Our rifles lined the dirt in front of us like an arc of thunder. He froze, slowly raised a hand, then dropped it. He said only 3 words, "Sorry, wrong spot." His voice trembled. His teeth clicked as he swallowed. Then they backed away slowly. All 4 got in. Engines roared to life. Gravel sprayed as they spun tires and peeled out. For a while, everyone stood still. No breathing, just the aftershock. Then my uncle tapped my shoulder. "They're gone," he whispered, voice low. I thought I'd never breathe again. My brother and uncle slid into their quads. I followed, boots kicking gravel over the tailgate as I climbed. My uncle revved his quad and swung us down the narrow wash. We knew these canyons like veins on our palms. We didn't follow directly. We guided ourselves, trackers of terrain. We fanned out, 20 yards apart, hugging canyon walls, staying low, ears alert, radio silent. When we reached the main road just beyond Canyon's lip, the trucks were gone. I felt relief. No crash coming around the bend. No armed return. My brother had phone service and dialed the sheriff's department. We gave plate numbers, direction of travel, descriptions. It took only a few minutes to pinpoint them. The cops called back, told us to stand by. Meanwhile, dusk stained the sky purple and orange as we slowly rode back. Adrenaline easing but leaving a hum in our chests. Camp stung with the echo of that encounter. Kids stared at us, eyes searching for answers. I put my rifle down gently, kneeling to brush my cousin's hair before standing. My mom slipped her hand into mine, shaky but steady. About 15 minutes later, headlights washed through the canyon entrance. Flashing lights, the authority reached deep. Officers came over the rise and streamed through our spot. They met us calmly, handled weapons carefully. They secured the perimeter, cuffed the men at the gas station who'd returned to refuel, and collected weapons as evidence. We were never on edge once they were cuffed. But I remember breathing in deep, slow breaths, the canyon walls humming with silence again. The officers told us the men were gang members, wanted for multiple offenses, and had loaded weapons in their trucks. Their wrong spot apology crumbled under the weight of their plates and fates. They were taken off in cuffs. The trucks were towed. The cops thanked us for quick thinking, clear communication, and restraint. They said it was rare for crimes like that to unfold in such open desert, usually forced from shadow. We'd confronted open daylight threat with calm force. We'd saved ourselves. We slept in the canyon that night. Wind curled through tent openings. Fire coals glowed under stars. No voices except quiet family check-ins. No nightmares. Everything felt safe again. We sat around the embers, kids asleep in sleeping bags. My dad handed out thermoses of strong coffee. We didn't need to talk much. Silence tasted like victory. As dawn crept up, the dust had settled, literally and emotionally. We spent the morning cleaning gear. Guns out, unload, clean, inspect, re-rack. We filed incident reports, met with deputies along the road. And when lunch came, we shared sandwiches under the rising sun. Laughter came back. Not forced, but damp with relief. Before breaking camp, we lined the rifles on the tables once more. Dad addressed us. Training had worked, discipline had worked, and we'd stayed safe. He said everything must stay quiet until the legal process played out. We nodded. Every adult took a moment, touched their weapon's barrel. No pride, just respect, and a little somberness that we'd had to be prepared. That afternoon, we hiked up a dry stream bed. Kids chased lizards among rocks. My mom took her canes to the viewpoint, leaning on a rock as she looked over the canyon, wind tangling her hair. I sat a bit away, watching. I felt that this place we'd grown up in had tested us, that we'd risen to its demand. I felt calm. I felt strong. I felt rooted. We drove out later that day. The dust on the vehicles was thick, like a memory stamped on steel. We waved at the deputies at the gate. We closed the tailgates. As we left the canyon, we passed those same sandstone walls one last time. I looked back. We came in as a gathering. We left as a family tested and undivided. Those remote desert canyons had promised isolation. And one afternoon, they nearly delivered violence. But we met it with readiness, unity without panic, and we came through whole. Took days for the adrenaline spike to fade. But when it did, I looked back on the moment the strangers pulled in and realized that afternoon teaching kids to shoot wasn't just tradition or sport. It was training. It was practice for defense. It was preparation for a moment like that. A moment we faced with eyes open, weapons ready, but minds clear. The story no longer feels like one of danger. It feels like purpose. Feels like family. Feels like the desert canyons gave us more than place. They gave us test and answered with triumph. We started the trip with good spirits. It was early September, and the mornings were cold but clear. The plan was simple: 5 days, 150 miles down the Yukon River. We were starting at the south end of Lake Leurge. It's a massive stretch of water, and we had planned carefully. The lake has a reputation. If you capsize, the cold water takes you fast, maybe 20 minutes before hypothermia sets in. The advice is always the same: stay close to shore, no more than 100 yards. That was our rule too. The first morning, we were slow getting going. Loading the canoe took longer than expected. We had packed everything carefully: tent, dry bags, food barrels, a bear canister, extra clothes and dry sacks, emergency bivy sacks, a saw, rope, the usual gear. The sky was overcast, and the wind was already kicking up. It wasn't too bad at first, just annoying. The water had some chop, but nothing dangerous. By midday, the wind picked up hard. It wasn't just a headwind. It came at us sideways, sometimes slanting across the water and catching the bow. It forced us to paddle more on one side than the other. It was exhausting. Even hugging the shore, waves would slap the side of the canoe hard enough to splash cold water into our laps. We wore rain gear, but it didn't matter. That kind of wind drives the cold deep. My gloves were soaked by the afternoon, and my hands were stiff and clumsy. We made almost no progress. By the end of the first day, we hadn't gone half the distance we had planned. We barely found a decent place to camp. The shoreline in that stretch of Lake Leurge isn't always welcoming. It's not all soft beaches and driftwood. A lot of it is sharp, rocky ledges with dense bush behind them. We finally pulled off at a sloped gravel spit with enough flat ground to pitch the tent. We were too tired to talk much. Just pitched camp, boiled water, ate fast, and crawled into the sleeping bags, still damp and shivering. The second morning started the same. Wind, strong and steady. The lake looked like crumpled metal, reflecting gray clouds. It was noisy too, the kind of constant roar that gets inside your head. We kept paddling anyway. Every minute felt like work. My arms were sore. My lower back ached from bracing and balancing. Around noon, something changed. It was sudden, like a switch flipping. The wind just stopped, like it had never been there. The water smoothed out, went totally flat. We drifted for a few minutes without saying a word, just looking at it. It was like glass, like you could walk on it. The whole lake became a mirror of the sky above, endless silver with streaks of faint blue and pale gray clouds. I remember the sound of the paddle dipping into the water, so clear and crisp it felt like breaking silence in a church. We figured this was our shot. We were way behind schedule. We'd planned to stay near shore the whole time, but the shoreline curved in long peninsulas, and we thought maybe we could cut across, save an hour or two. On the map, it looked like a straight shot between 2 points of land, maybe a mile across. It didn't seem like much. With no wind and flat water, it felt safe. So we went for it. About halfway across, we were probably half a mile from either shore. Still glassy, still calm, but there was this feeling, hard to explain. Not dread, not yet, but I started checking the sky more often. The light had shifted a little. It had gone from silver and pale blue to something more gray, more flat. The clouds started thickening. No wind, but the kind of stillness that doesn't feel right. Like the air itself is waiting. Then I saw it, just a ripple on the far end of the lake. You get to recognize those signs. A ripple where there shouldn't be one. Started small, but it grew fast. The water darkened under it. The sky followed. Cold gust hit my face. Smelled sharp, like rain and rock and something metallic. Then another gust. And just like that, the lake stopped being a mirror. Waves came fast. Not huge at first, but they built quickly. The wind didn't ease in. It punched us. The canoe started rocking hard, tipping a little more with each passing wave. The sky darkened so fast it looked like someone turned the sun off. We saw flashes in the clouds. Lightning, thin and high at first, but getting closer. We didn't talk. We didn't have to. We both turned the canoe into the waves. If we tried to keep going sideways across them, we'd flip for sure. The waves were growing 2 feet, then more. They weren't regular either. Some came faster, some slammed harder. Felt chaotic. You couldn't fall into a rhythm. We rode hard. Harder than I've ever rode in my life. We weren't trying to move forward anymore. We were just trying not to drift farther into the middle of that massive lake. We had no anchor, nothing to hold us. So we paddled like hell just to keep our position. Each time we slowed down even a little, the wind shoved us backward. Lightning cracked again, closer this time. I couldn't even tell how far. It echoed off the water. Thunder came almost right after. That's when I really felt it, that crawling, primal feeling that you might die here. Not because of anything dramatic. Not because of a bear or a fall or a freak accident. Just cold water and bad timing. Dying here would be slow and quiet. Your canoe flips, you go under, your lungs seize from the shock, your limbs stop working, and that's it. No one would ever find you. We kept turning the bow into the waves, bracing hard. I remember my hands burning, shoulders screaming. The paddle felt heavier with every stroke. A few times, water poured over the side. Not a little splash, a full dump into the bottom of the boat. Our boots were soaked. Our packs were getting wet despite the dry bags. I could feel the cold water pooling around my feet. My mind kept racing, calculating how far it was to shore, how long we could keep paddling, how close the lightning was. But mostly it was just a blur. Focus, paddle, brace, breathe. Over and over. The same motion. The same fear. After maybe 45 minutes, though it felt like hours, the wind started to ease. Not stop, but weaken enough that we could actually make headway. We still had to fight it, but now we were gaining a few feet at a time. The shore was maybe a quarter mile away by then. It looked impossibly far, but we were moving toward it, finally. The waves didn't stop. They rolled under us, cold and relentless, but they weren't as tall anymore, not crashing over the sides, just slapping, pushing. We paddled in silence, both of us soaked, both of us exhausted. When we hit the shore, we didn't celebrate. We just dragged the canoe halfway up the rocks and collapsed next to it. My hands were trembling. My legs barely held me up when I stood. I looked back out at the lake and saw the storm still moving, racing north, the tail end breaking up over the far side. We didn't have time or energy to build a proper shelter. We found a narrow spot behind a rocky outcrop with a bit of tree cover, threw up a tarp as best we could, tied it low between some driftwood and a bent tree. It wasn't elegant. It barely covered both of us. We crawled underneath and just sat there for a long time, wrapped in our sleeping bags, too stunned to talk. Later, we got a small fire going with what dry wood we could scavenge. Not much, but enough to boil water and warm our hands. We didn't unpack much that night. Just enough food to eat something hot, dehydrated chili, and a bit of trail mix. I kept shaking for a long time. Not from cold, just from nerves. That kind of fear doesn't go away fast. It sticks to your bones. The rest of the trip wasn't easy, but nothing came close to that second day on Lake Leurge. We kept to shore like our lives depended on it, because they did. The wind came and went, the river narrowed again, and we made better time. But we both knew we had come close. Too close. People hear about storms and think of drama, of crashing thunder and howling wind. But out there, in the middle of a flat lake, with nothing between you and the cold black water, the real fear is quieter. It's the moment you realize you don't have control anymore. The moment you know that nature doesn't care about your schedule or your plan or your gear. We made it out. We finished the trip, pulled into our last stop 5 days later, soaked and sore and quiet. There wasn't any big moment of relief or triumph. Just the feeling of touching solid ground and knowing you don't have to fight anymore. That 45 minutes on Lake Leurge never left Maine. It plays in the back of my mind every time I see still water or feel a gust of wind roll across a lake. The silence before the storm, the waves building under the boat, the crack of lightning. I can still feel all of it. I've had worse moments, maybe. I've had weirder and stranger stories. But I've never had a moment where I was more certain I might not make it back. That lake doesn't forgive mistakes. We were lucky. That's all it was. Just luck and not letting go of the paddle. I was hiking alone in a dense California forest once. It started as a plan for me and a friend to hike together, but she got a migraine halfway through the trail and decided to take a shortcut back to our campsite. She said she could make it faster on her own and just wait for me when I got back. I didn't want to slow her down, so I told her I'd finish the whole trail by myself. I thought it would be fine, just me, the forest, and the trail ahead. The trail had been peaceful in the morning. The air was cool but starting to warm up with the sun climbing higher. The trees around me were thick, tall pines with their needles rustling gently in the breeze. The forest floor was soft underfoot, covered with layers of dry leaves, pine cones, and twigs that snapped quietly as I walked. The path was narrow but clear, winding down a steep hill through the dense woods. I was descending, careful not to slip on loose stones and exposed roots. At first, everything seemed normal. Birds chirped here and there. A squirrel darted up a tree. The smell of pine and damp earth filled the air. But as I went deeper into the woods, the trail got quieter. The birds stopped singing. The wind fell away, and the forest felt heavier, like the silence itself was watching me. I could feel my heart starting to beat a little faster, but I told myself to calm down. I was used to hiking alone sometimes. I kept moving forward. Then I heard it, a scream, A truly blood-curdling scream that cut through the stillness like a knife. It was sharp and loud, full of pain and terror. First, I froze. My mind raced. Was it a person? Someone hurt or attacked? The scream sounded so real, so close, it sent a chill through me. But the woods were empty. There was no way anyone was nearby. I scanned the thick trees, expecting to see something, anything. But all I saw was the dense forest and shadows. Then the screams came again, longer and louder this time. My stomach dropped. It wasn't a person. It was something else. The sound had a wild animal quality, like a scream mixed with growls. It hit me suddenly. It had to be a mountain lion. I remembered reading about how mountain lions can scream in a way that sounds almost human, especially when they're angry or hunting. That realization did not help. If anything, it made things worse. I was alone, far from the campsite. My friend was already gone. And now, somewhere in those trees, a mountain lion was making those horrible screams, probably stalking its prey. I tried to decide what to do. Should I be loud and try to scare it off? Or should I stay quiet, hoping it wouldn't notice me? I had no idea what the right choice was. The screams came again, a little farther off now, but still close enough to make my blood run cold. My heart was pounding so loud I thought it might burst. I stopped moving and stood completely still. I tried to listen carefully to figure out where the sound was coming from. The screams seemed to come from the left side of the trail, deeper into the woods, near a thicket of bushes and fallen logs. I held my breath, waiting, hoping whatever it was would go away. Minutes passed, maybe 10, maybe more. The silence returned slowly. The forest seemed to breathe again. I started to back away, moving slowly and quietly but deliberately away from the direction of the screams. My feet barely made a sound on the dry leaves. I didn't dare look behind me, afraid that if I did, I might see something watching, waiting in the shadows. Every crack of a twig or rustle of leaves made me jump. My mind was racing with questions. Was the lion still following me? Had it already attacked someone else? Was I going to make it back safely? I couldn't stop thinking about the scream, how real and desperate it sounded. It was the kind of sound you never forget, the kind of sound that makes you wonder how close death really is. I kept hiking down the trail, moving faster but still careful not to slip. The hill got steeper and the trees thinner as I approached the bottom, where the campsite was supposed to be. The sun was lower now, starting to set behind the hills. Shadows stretched long and deep across the forest floor. I tried to calm my breathing, to focus on the trail ahead, but the fear was still there, thick and heavy in my chest. Finally, I saw the edge of the forest opening up. The trail ended near a small clearing where I could see the tents of other campers, including ours. Relief washed over me in waves. I was safe. I was out of the woods. I walked the last few steps and saw my friend sitting by our campsite, looking pale but better. I was sure I looked like a ghost myself, white-faced and shaken. That night, as I lay in my tent, I kept hearing the echo of those screams in my mind. I wondered if anyone else had heard them, if they knew what had been out there in the woods. I thought about what could have happened if I hadn't listened carefully or if the mountain lion had been closer. The thought made my skin crawl. I realized then how small and vulnerable I really was in that wild forest. I never forgot that hike. The way the forest can go from calm to terrifying in seconds. The way nature's sounds can turn into warnings, or worse. It's a feeling I hope never to experience again, but one I'll always remember. The raw fear of being alone and hunted in the woods. Another time, I was at a music festival. It was one of those big outdoor events where people camp right next to each other in a giant field packed with tents. The ground was soft and a little muddy from rain earlier in the week. There were hundreds of people everywhere, all buzzing with music and excitement. The night before, the camp was full of noise, laughter, shouting, music blasting, and the smell of campfires and grills. My friend and I had set up our small tent close to the back of the field. It wasn't much, just a basic two-person tent with a thin sleeping pad inside. We were tired from the day's activities and fell asleep early, wrapped in sleeping bags, listening to the distant music. The sounds of the festival slowly faded as most people settled down for the night. I don't know exactly what time it was when I woke up. It was still dark outside, just before dawn. But I was startled awake by the sound of a truck engine. It was loud and rough, tearing through the quiet night. My heart jumped. At first, I thought maybe it was a delivery truck or something driving on a nearby road. But then I realized the sound was moving closer, right toward our campsite. I sat up in my sleeping bag, squinting through the tent's thin fabric. Outside, I could see the red glow of taillights moving slowly, almost creeping between the rows of tents. The truck was driving directly through the field where everyone was sleeping. It was crazy and dangerous, and I didn't understand why anyone would do that. Then I saw the headlights cut on for a moment, and my stomach dropped. The truck was headed straight for our tent. I scrambled out of my sleeping bag and grabbed my friend's arm. She was still asleep, barely waking up, groggy and confused. I pulled her close and quickly rolled her on top of me as the truck reached our tent. The tires crushed the fabric, tearing the tent in half where she had been sleeping just moments before. The ground shook under the truck's weight. It all happened so fast. The truck's engine roared as it drove through, stopping just a few feet beyond us. People started yelling and running toward the driver, but I didn't look back. I held my friend tight, making sure she was okay. She was shaken but not hurt. After the truck passed, the campsite was filled with chaos. People shouting, tents ripped apart, some campers crying or checking their belongings. Felt like a nightmare. How could anyone be so reckless? Driving a truck through a crowded campsite, risking lives and ruining people's gear. It was selfish and dangerous. The organizers eventually got the driver to leave, and the police showed up later to take a report. Some people said it was a prank gone wrong or someone drunk making bad decisions. But for me and my friend, the memory of waking up to a truck crashing through our tent stayed with us long after the festival ended. That morning, I helped my friend pack up what was left of our camp. We didn't say much. We just moved quietly through the wreckage, grateful we were both safe. The whole experience was a harsh reminder that danger can come from the wild woods or even from the careless hands of other people. In those moments, fear isn't something you can control. It just takes over, and all you can do is hold on and hope to get through it. I worked in Yellowstone during the summers of 2011 and then again from spring to fall in 2013. Spending that much time in the park, I got used to hearing stories about the wildlife, especially the bears. Bears were a constant presence in the back of my mind, even when I wasn't working. I knew they were wild and dangerous and that any mistake could lead to serious trouble. It was just part of the job, part of living in that environment. In the summer of 2013, my girlfriend and I decided to go camping just outside Cook City. I chose the spot because it was close to where I had heard a terrible story a couple of years before. Back in 2011, I'd heard about a bear attack that happened at the campground we planned to stay at. 3 people had been attacked and one of them had died. The story stuck with me. It was real, not some campfire tale. Before we went to bed that night, I asked the waiter at a small restaurant in Cook City if the story was true. He confirmed it. The attack had happened 3 years earlier, right there at that campground. It gave me a chill, but I pushed it down. I figured we were prepared. We had all the gear we needed. Bear spray was right by my girlfriend's side of the tent, and I kept my softball bat next to me. I wanted to feel ready, like if something came near, we could protect ourselves or at least scare it off. But even with that, camping in grizzly territory is nerve-wracking. You never feel completely safe. The night settled in with a calm that felt heavy, like the world was holding its breath. The forest around us was dark, but the sky was clear, and the full moon hung bright above, casting a pale glow through the trees and onto the ground. It was peaceful, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't alone. Somewhere around the middle of the night, I woke up with the overwhelming urge to pee. I was lying there, staring into the dark inside the tent, trying to work up the courage to unzip the door and step out into the cold night air. My heart was already pounding. The forest noises, the rustle of the leaves, the distant call of an owl seemed louder than usual. Then I heard it, a heavy, steady sound coming from the small stream that ran not far from our tent. It wasn't the usual trickle of water. It was something large moving through it, the deep, slow clomp of a massive animal crossing the water. My heart slammed against my ribs, adrenaline hitting me like a shockwave. Every nerve in my body jumped awake. I was frozen, scared to move but too wired to stay still. The sound got closer. I could hear the splash of water and heavy footsteps moving toward our campsite. My breath caught. Slowly, I reached over my girlfriend, who had started to stir, probably waking up from the sound too. I had to grab the bear spray beside her without waking her completely or causing panic. As my hand brushed over her arm, she stirred fully awake, eyes wide in the moonlight. I pressed my hand gently but firmly over her mouth, whispering for her to stay silent. There was no time for words. The pounding steps continued, heavy and uneven. Mixed in with the steps was something strange. A thud, like something hard hitting the ground again and again. We both stayed still, barely breathing, straining to hear what was going on just outside our tent. After what felt like an eternity, we slowly worked up the courage to unzip the tent's fly, peeling it back just enough to look out into the moonlight. What we saw was completely unexpected. Right in our campsite, standing quietly near the edge of our gear, were two elk, a massive bull and a doe. The bull elk was doing something strange. It was picking up a rock with its huge antlers and dropping it over and over onto the ground. The thud we'd been hearing was the rock hitting the earth. It wasn't aggressive, but it was definitely strange behavior, almost like it was playing or marking the territory. The doe stood beside him, calm and still, watching the scene as if nothing was out of the ordinary. Their eyes reflected in the moonlight, bright and alert, but they made no move to come closer to the tent or scare us away. It was one of the coolest and strangest things I'd ever seen in the wild, but at the same time, it was terrifying. I was a chicken, honestly. Even knowing that it wasn't a bear, having a huge bull elk messing around in your campsite in the middle of the night, right where you're sleeping, is enough to give anyone the creeps, especially in grizzly country where anything else could be lurking nearby. We stayed completely still and quiet until the elk wandered away, the bull dropping the rock one last time before lumbering off into the trees with the doe following. The forest noises slowly returned, and the adrenaline started to fade enough for me to finally get up and use the bathroom, still gripping the softball bat tightly. The rest of the night was restless. Every little noise made me jump. My mind kept going back to the bear attack story and all the close calls I'd heard about while working in Yellowstone. Even though nothing bad happened, the night stayed heavy in my memory. Years before that trip, I had another close call with a bear, camping above Yosemite when I was about 10. My aunt, cousin, and I were camping, and during the night a black bear shattered the back passenger window of my aunt's car to get inside. The crash of the glass woke us up, and we watched, frozen, as the bear rummaged through the car, grabbing anything it could find. It was terrifying to be that close to a bear and see how quickly they could break into something and cause chaos. My aunt and cousin stayed safe, but that night left a permanent mark on how I think about camping in bear country. That experience, combined with the one at Cook City, taught me that being prepared doesn't mean you're ever completely safe out there. Nature is wild and unpredictable. No matter how much you try to control it or plan for it, it's always going to surprise you. Those nights weren't about ghost stories or made-up monsters. They were about real life, real dangers, and real moments where I felt small and vulnerable. I still camp, but I always carry my bear spray and something to defend myself with, and I keep my senses sharp. Because no matter how many years pass, the memory of that elk dropping rocks right outside our tent, and the sound of a large animal crossing the stream in the dead of night, stays with me. It reminds me that out there, in the wild, you never know what's watching, waiting, or wandering through your camp. And that's the kind of fear that sticks with you, not from something made up, but from something very real.